You retired 6 months ago, and you have never been busier in your life. There is the morning walk at 7, the golf league on Tuesdays, volunteering at the library on Thursdays, the grandchildren on weekends, the home improvement project you finally have time for, the travel you always promised yourself, the schedule you have carefully constructed so that every hour has somewhere to be and something to do. And yet, quietly, somewhere underneath all of it, there is a feeling you cannot name. A low hum. A vague unease that follows you through your packed days, like a shadow you cannot shake no matter how fast you move. You might tell yourself you are just adjusting. You might decide it will pass. But here is what the research actually says about that feeling, and why the busiest retirees are often the ones who are most lost. Psychologists who study the transition into retirement have identified something they call activity substitution. It is the very human tendency to fill the hours that work once occupied with a relentless stream of new activities. On the surface, it looks like thriving. From the outside, it looks like exactly what a healthy retirement is supposed to look like. But what the research reveals again and again is that staying busy and finding meaning are not the same thing. And for many retirees, busyness quietly becomes a way to avoid confronting that difference. Robert Atchley was one of the most influential researchers in the study of retirement adjustment. His theory of retirement continuity, developed over decades of longitudinal work, proposed that people transition most successfully into retirement, not by radically redesigning their lives, but by maintaining a thread of continuity with who they have always been. The key word there is who. Not what you do, who you are. When that internal continuity is threatened, when the role that anchored your identity for 30 or 40 years simply disappears, the mind reaches instinctively for the nearest substitute, and that substitute is almost always activity. So picture what that actually looks like in practice. You were a project manager for 28 years. Your entire inner world was organized around deliverables, deadlines, the satisfaction of seeing something through from beginning to end. You were competent. You were needed. You were the person people came to when things needed to get done. That feeling of being the person who handles things was not just a professional identity. It was you. Now retirement arrives, and that role is gone. Not reduced, gone. And your mind, without consciously deciding to, begins reconstructing something that feels similar. You take on the renovation project with the same intensity you once brought to quarterly reports. You schedule the grandchildren's visits with the precision of a logistics coordinator. You join not one but 3 volunteer organizations and become, within weeks, the person everyone calls when something needs doing. You are, by every external measure, thriving. But here is the counterintuitive truth that the psychology of retirement keeps returning to. Staying relentlessly busy can actually slow down or completely prevent the deeper process of identity reconstruction that retirement demands. And it is that process, not the activities themselves, that determines whether the second chapter of your life feels genuinely meaningful or just exhaustingly full. Erik Erikson, the developmental psychologist whose framework of human life stages remains one of the most referenced in the field, described the central psychological task of later life as ego integrity, the ability to look back on your life and find coherence, meaning, and acceptance in what you see. He argued that this process requires not just reflection, but a kind of honest reckoning with who you have been and who you are becoming. It is slow work, it is quiet work, it is the kind of work that an overscheduled retirement never leaves room for. Think about the last time you sat in genuine stillness, not scrolling, not planning the next thing, just sitting with your thoughts and letting whatever was underneath rise to the surface. If that thought makes you faintly anxious, that anxiety is worth paying attention to. Research published in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that retirees who reported the highest levels of subjective well-being in the years following retirement were not those who immediately replaced work with the most activity. They were the ones who went through a period of deliberate deceleration, a season of reduced busyness during which they were able to ask, and slowly answer, questions that work had never given them time for. Questions like, what do I actually value, now that no one is paying me to value anything? Who am I when no one needs me to be anything in particular? What does a day feel like when its worth does not come from productivity? These are not comfortable questions. For people whose identities were deeply woven into their careers, and research consistently shows that this is more common among high achievers, long-tenure employees, and people who found genuine purpose in their work, sitting with those questions without immediately filling the silence can feel almost physically uncomfortable. The busyness is not laziness. It is not avoidance in any simple or self-aware sense. It is the mind doing exactly what minds are designed to do, protecting you from feelings that feel too large to hold. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor whose work on human meaning has influenced generations of therapists and researchers, wrote that the greatest human need is not pleasure or even happiness, but meaning, a sense that your life is about something. Frankl called the absence of this existential vacuum. And the symptoms he described are not despair or collapse. They are, perhaps surprisingly, restlessness, compulsive busyness, and a constant search for stimulation that never quite satisfies. Does that sound familiar? The existential vacuum does not announce itself as a crisis. It feels more like a persistent, low-grade hunger that you keep trying to satisfy with food that does not nourish you. You add another commitment to the calendar, finish the renovation, plan the next trip, say yes to the next grandchild's weekend, and the hunger is still there on Monday morning, waiting. This is not a character flaw. It is not ingratitude. It is what happens when the structure that once gave your days meaning disappears, and the meaning itself has not yet been rebuilt from something deeper. So what does rebuilding actually look like? The Harvard Study of Adult Development, one of the longest-running studies of adult life in history, following participants for over 80 years, consistently found that the most important predictor of late-life flourishing was not physical health, wealth, status, or even how busy and engaged people remained. It was the depth and quality of their relationships, not the number of social engagements on the calendar. The depth, the honesty, the willingness to be known and to know others, not through roles and accomplishments, but through presence and vulnerability. Many retirees find, when they slow down enough to notice, that the connections their busy retirement life provides are surprisingly surface level. The golf league is social but not intimate. The volunteer group is purposeful but not personal. The grandchildren weekends are joyful but organized around the children's needs, not your own inner life. None of these things are wrong, but a life made entirely of them, with no space for the slower, harder work of depth and self-knowledge, can leave you feeling obscurely lonely even when you are never alone. Retirement psychology researchers sometimes call this the structure trap. The trap is not idleness. It is the opposite. It is the construction of a new external structure, the schedule, the commitments, the busyness, before the internal structure has had time to form. And the result is a life that looks full from the outside and feels strangely hollow from within. The retirees who find their way through this, who arrive at what researchers describe as genuine post-retirement flourishing, tend to share a few things in common. They allowed themselves a period of honest discomfort without immediately solving it. They began to distinguish between activities they did out of genuine curiosity and love, and activities they did because they needed to feel useful. They cultivated at least one relationship in which they could speak honestly about what retirement actually felt like, not just what it looked like. And they gradually built a sense of purpose that came not from performance or productivity, but from something quieter. A value, a curiosity, a way of being in the world that no employer had ever needed from them before. That purpose may not arrive on a schedule. It may not look impressive from the outside. It may be something as simple as a daily walk that becomes, over months, a genuine meditation. A relationship that deepens because you finally have time to let it. A creative practice that serves no function and no one but you. The question retirement is really asking you, underneath the calendar and the commitments and the carefully constructed busyness, is not what will you do with your time. It is who will you be, now that you no longer have to be anything for anyone else. That is a harder question. It takes longer. It requires more stillness than most retirement advice ever tells you to allow. But it is the only question whose answer will make the mornings feel like something other than a problem to be managed. You pour your morning coffee. There is nowhere you need to be. And maybe, if you let it, that is not a wait. Maybe it is the first open door you have stood in front of in 40 years.